The inheritance check was still warm in my hands when I caught him on the phone. "Don't worry about her," he whispered, unaware I was standing in the doorway. "Once I get control of the funds, we'll finally have everything we need." In that moment, the dream I'd been living shattered like fine crystal against hardwood. The man who had vowed to love me forever was plotting to steal the final gift my grandmother had left me. But he never anticipated that her wisdom would extend beyond the grave, or that a forensic accountant would unravel the web he'd been spinning for years. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Rebecca Taylor, though most people call me Becca. At 36, I thought I understood how the world worked. I'd built a comfortable life as a physical therapist in Denver, helping others recover from their injuries while steadily paying off my student loans. I'd weathered my parents' messy divorce as a teenager, and my grandmother becoming my rock through those turbulent years. I wasn't naive, at least that's what I told myself. But looking back, I realize how desperately I wanted to believe in the carefully constructed reality my husband had created for us. I met Nathan during what should have been a simple home renovation project. My small condo needed updating, and he was the contractor recommended by a colleague. He arrived with toolbox in hand and an easy smile that crinkled the corners of his hazel eyes. "Kitchen renovations are my specialty," he'd said, surveying my outdated space with confident expertise. "I can transform this into something beautiful." And he did. Not just my kitchen, but my entire life. Or so I believed. After the renovation was complete, he asked me to dinner. "I don't usually do this with clients," he said, looking almost bashful. "But I'd kick myself if I didn't at least try." That dinner turned into movie nights, weekend hikes in the Rockies, and eventually, a proposal overlooking the city lights from Lookout Mountain. Nathan was charming in a down-to-earth way. He could chat with anyone, from the barista at our local coffee shop to my most distinguished colleagues at charity events. He seemed transparent about his contracting business, showing me projects in progress and sharing stories about difficult clients. He spoke passionately about eventually expanding beyond residential work into commercial projects. "That's where the real opportunity is," he'd explain, sketching ideas on napkins over dinner. "I just need the right moment to make the leap." My grandmother Helen was the only one who seemed hesitant about our relationship. During one of our Sunday phone calls about 6 months into dating Nathan, she simply asked, "Does he value you or what you offer him?" I laughed it off. "He's not after my physical therapist salary, Gran," I joked. She didn't laugh back. "Not? All values are financial, sweetheart," she said. "Watch how he treats the dream that isn't his." That conversation nagged at me, but I pushed it aside. After all, Nathan supported my career completely. He came to clinic fundraisers, listened to my frustrations about difficult cases, and encouraged me to pursue specialized certification. When I was passed over for a promotion I desperately wanted, he brought home champagne anyway. "Let's celebrate you instead," he'd said. Their loss. We married in a mountain ceremony 2 years after meeting. It wasn't extravagant. We both talked about being practical with money, but it was beautiful and intimate. Nathan's parents had passed years before, so it was mostly my small family and our mutual friends. Grandmother Helen, then 86, danced with more energy than guests half her age. She hugged me tightly before leaving. "Remember who you are," she whispered, "no matter what happens." The first 3 years of marriage flowed relatively smoothly. We moved from my condo to a small house in a developing neighborhood. Nathan's business had steady work, though he occasionally mentioned cash flow challenges that seemed normal for a self-employed contractor. He began taking on fewer projects, explaining he was becoming more selective to build a premium brand. It made sense. especially when he started discussing plans for a design-build firm that would elevate his work from contracting to full-service development. "I've been meeting with potential investors," he mentioned casually over dinner one evening. "People who see the vision for something bigger than handyman projects." When I asked about specifics, he'd give vague responses about connections through clients and preliminary discussions. "Nothing to get excited about yet," he'd say. "But I'm laying groundwork." I trusted him completely. The subtle changes were easy to rationalize away. The new golf membership he insisted would help him network with potential clients. The upgraded truck for his business that we financed rather than paid outright. The business trips to real estate conferences that always seemed to run over budget. He began keeping his phone face down and stepping outside for calls. "Just client confidentiality," he explained when I noticed. "Some of these high-end homeowners are particular about privacy." Then my grandmother's health began to decline. At 89, her mind remained sharp as ever, but her body was finally showing its age. I drove the hour to her mountain cottage every weekend, helping with groceries, medication management, and simply spending time together. Nathan rarely joined, citing weekend work commitments. "Someone has to keep the business running," he'd remind me, not unkindly. "You focus on Helen. I've got everything else covered." When she fell and broke her hip, the doctor warned me recovery at her age would be challenging. I took family leave from the clinic to help with her rehabilitation. A bitter irony that I could help countless patients recover from similar injuries, yet couldn't guarantee the same for the woman who'd been my foundation. During those weeks at her cottage, I noticed how sparingly she lived despite having resources. "Money is just a tool, Becca," she told me during one of our afternoon talks. "The question is whether it's building something worthwhile." She passed, away peacefully in her sleep just 2 months later. The grief hit me like a physical weight, stealing my breath and clarity. Nathan stepped up impressively during the funeral arrangements, handling details I couldn't face and keeping family updated. "Let me be strong for you now," he said, holding me as I cried. "You've carried everyone else for so long." A week after the funeral, Helen's attorney contacted me about the reading of her will. I wasn't expecting much, perhaps her cottage and modest savings. Nathan insisted on coming with me. "You shouldn't deal with this alone," he said. "We're a team." The attorney's office was warm and smelled of old books and coffee. Ms. Winters, a colleague of my grandmother's longtime attorney, who had himself retired years ago, welcomed us with gentle professionalism. "Your grandmother was a remarkable woman," she began, and extremely methodical about her affairs. What followed left both Nathan and me in stunned silence. My frugal, seemingly modest-living grandmother had left an estate valued at just over $2 million. The mountain cottage property had appreciated significantly over the decades, but the real surprise was her investment portfolio, which she had managed with quiet expertise since my grandfather's death nearly 30 years before. She was quite skilled at recognizing value, Ms. Winters explained, both in companies and in people. The bulk of the estate was left to me, with specific bequests to 3 charities she had supported throughout her life. The cottage and $250,000 were to be transferred immediately, with the remaining investments to be distributed after the estate cleared probate. I sat in shock, barely registering the attorney's words as she continued explaining tax implications and next steps. Nathan, however, was fully engaged beside me, asking detailed questions about access, timelines, and management options. His hand squeezed mine tightly. "This is incredible," he whispered. "She took care of you until the very end." The drive home felt surreal. I was processing both grief and disbelief, while Nathan seemed energized, already making suggestions about the cottage. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "We could renovate it as a vacation rental," he proposed, Or sell it and use the capital for something bigger. The market in that area is hot right now. I'm not ready to think about that, I said quietly. It's only been a week, Nathan. I need time. He reached over to squeeze my knee. Of course, babe. I'm just excited for what this means for us, for the future we've been working toward. That night, Nathan opened a bottle of expensive whiskey I hadn't seen before. I was saving this for a special occasion, he explained, pouring us each a glass. And this qualifies. As we sat on our back deck, he began outlining possibilities. More specifically, the design-build firm could finally move forward. We could use the cottage as collateral for a larger business loan. The initial inheritance could fund the office space and staff he'd need to launch properly. Slow down, I said, feeling overwhelmed. I haven't even processed that she's gone, let alone made decisions about her money. His expression flickered, momentarily before softening. You're right, I'm getting ahead of myself. It's just, this solves so many problems we've been facing. What problems? I asked, suddenly alert. The business has been fine, right? You said things were stable. He took a long sip of whiskey. Stable but stuck. I've been treading water, taking smaller jobs to keep cash flowing while trying to position for bigger opportunities. This could be the break we need to level up. He leaned forward, eyes intense. Let me show you what's possible. Give me a few days to put together a proper business plan. True to his word, 3 days later he presented me with a professionally bound proposal. Glossy pages outlined Taylor Design Collective, a full-service development firm that would focus on luxury renovations and small commercial projects. The financial projections showed impressive returns within 3 years. What struck me was how complete it was, almost as if he'd had it prepared and waiting. You put this together in 3 days? I asked, flipping through detailed market analyses and competitor comparisons. I've been working on versions of it for years, he admitted. Just needed to update the numbers based on current capital availability. He pointed to a specific page. With your inheritance as seed funding, we can skip the venture capital phase entirely. Keep full ownership in the family. In my grief-fogged state, that phrase, in the family, hit me emotionally. The idea of building something lasting, something that honored my grandmother's financial legacy, had undeniable appeal. Still, something felt rushed. I need to take care of the cottage first, I said, and I'd like to meet with a financial advisor before committing to anything. Nathan agreed readily, but over the next 2 weeks, his enthusiasm morphed into something more persistent. He scheduled contractor visits to the cottage without consulting me. He began introducing himself to people as the CEO of Taylor Design Collective, as if it already existed. When I mentioned wanting to use some of the initial inheritance to pay off my student loans, his response was unexpectedly sharp. That's throwing money away, he said firmly. Those loans are at what, 4%? The business will return at least 20% annually once it's established. Basic financial sense says, keep the low-interest debt and invest in higher returns. His logic wasn't wrong exactly, but his dismissiveness was new. When I suggested we at least pay off our car loans, he became frustrated. You're thinking too small, Becca. This is our one shot at building real wealth. The "our" and "we" peppered. His language constantly, though the business plan listed him as sole owner and CEO. A month after the will reading, I met with a financial advisor recommended by my clinic's medical director. I invited Nathan to join, but he had a crucial meeting with a potential client. The advisor, Elaine Davidson, reviewed my grandmother's portfolio with obvious respect. She built this very thoughtfully, Elaine noted. These aren't flashy investments, but they're remarkably solid. She clearly valued stability and sustainable growth. When I mentioned Nathan's business proposal, Elaine maintained professional neutrality, but asked pointed questions about risk assessment, research validity, and contingency planning. "Would you mind if I reviewed the business plan?" she asked. Not to overstep, but given the amount of potential investment, a second opinion might be valuable. I agreed and forwarded her the PDF that night. Nathan was displeased when I told him. "These financial advisor types always favor the safe play," he said dismissively. "They're trained to protect wealth, not create it. Entrepreneurs have to take calculated risks." "It's just due diligence," I countered. "Gran would have wanted me to be thorough." His expression softened immediately. "You're right. I'm being pushy. It's just, I see so clearly what we could build together, and I get impatient." He pulled me into a hug. "Take whatever time you need. I know you'll make the right decision." That weekend, I drove alone to the cottage, needing space to think and feel closer to Gran. As I sorted through her belongings, I found a leather-bound journal in her bedside table. Inside were not personal entries as I expected, but meticulous notes about her investments, family history, and explicitly, me. The final entries, dated just weeks before her death, shook me to my core. "Rebecca speaks less of her own dreams. Lately," she'd written in her precise handwriting. "Her words echo his perspective more often than her own. I fear the bright, determined girl who fought her way through graduate school is dimming her light to accommodate his vision. The inheritance may force truths to surface, which is perhaps its greatest value beyond monetary measure." I sat on her bed, journal clutched to my chest, suddenly seeing the past 3 years through new eyes. Had I been subsuming my identity into Nathan's? Had my grandmother seen something I'd been blind to? I spent the weekend alternating between sorting belongings and reading her journals, finding financial wisdom scattered among deeply insightful observations about life and relationships. When I returned home Sunday evening, Nathan was unusually agitated. "You didn't answer my calls," he said as I brought my overnight bag in. I was worried. "The cell reception is spotty up there," I reminded him. "You know that, and I needed some time alone." He followed me to the bedroom. "Did you think more about the business plan?" Elaine emailed me with questions that seemed pretty skeptical. "We need to move forward soon if we want to secure the Cherry Creek property for the office." I froze. "You're looking at properties already? Nathan, I haven't agreed to anything yet." He ran a hand through his hair. "It's just preliminary research. But opportunities like this don't wait, Becca. We need to be ready to move." "There's no we in this business plan," I said quietly. "At least not on paper. You're listed as sole owner." Something flickered across his face. "That's just legal structure. Everything I build is for us. You know that." I set my bag down and faced him directly. "I think we need to slow down and reassess. I've been going along with so much without really thinking it through." "What's that supposed to mean?" His tone sharpened. "It means I'm not ready to commit my inheritance to your business. I need more time." The conversation deteriorated from there. What began as a discussion became increasingly tense, with Nathan veering between logical business arguments and emotional appeals. "After everything I've done to support your career? Your time with your grandmother? This is how you repay that?" I slept in the guest room that night, mind racing. The next morning, Nathan was contrite, apologizing for pressuring me. "Take all the time you need," he said, kissing my forehead before leaving for what he described as a client meeting. That afternoon, Elaine called. "Do you have time to meet today?" she asked, her tone carefully neutral. "I've reviewed the business plan and have some concerns I'd prefer to discuss in person." 2 hours later, I sat in her office as she gently but systematically highlighted discrepancies in the proposal. The market research appeared selectively curated. The revenue projections used best-case scenarios without adequate risk assessment. Most concerning was the vague description of existing business debts that would be consolidated into the new entity. Have you seen current financial statements for your husband's contracting business? She asked. I hadn't. Nathan handled all the business finances separately from our personal accounts. He's always said the business is doing fine, I explained, feeling increasingly unsettled. Cash flow challenges sometimes, but that's normal, right? Elaine leaned forward. Rebecca, I recommend you get complete transparency on the current business before investing anything. Something doesn't add up. Here, she hesitated. I don't normally suggest this, but given the circumstances, you might consider consulting a forensic accountant, someone who specializes in reviewing financial records for inconsistencies or problems. You think he's hiding something? The idea seemed absurd, yet a cold feeling was spreading through my chest. I think you deserve complete information before making a major financial decision, she answered carefully. And I'm not seeing that transparency in these materials. I left her office in a daze. Instead of going home, I drove to the cottage again, needing my grandmother's presence, however symbolic. As dusk fell, I sat on her porch swing, feeling utterly lost. My phone lit up with multiple messages from Nathan, each more concerned about my whereabouts. I responded briefly that I needed space to think. His reply was immediate. About us, or the business? The fact that he separated those concepts struck me as telling. I stayed overnight again, and in the morning made 2 calls, first to a locksmith to change the cottage locks, then to a forensic accountant Elaine had recommended. Vincent Mercer agreed to see me that afternoon at his downtown office. Vincent was not what I expected, younger than I'd imagined, with a direct manner that was somehow both professional and compassionate. Most people who come to me already suspect something, he observed after I explained my situation. What tipped you off? Nothing specific, I admitted. Just accumulated doubts and a financial advisor's concerns. He nodded. Sometimes our instincts pick up patterns before our conscious mind can name them. Let's start with what you know for certain about your husband's business finances. Then identify what we need to discover. What followed was a methodical dismantling of my financial ignorance. I realized how completely I'd delegated understanding of our economic situation to Nathan. We had separate personal accounts and a joint household account. But I knew embarrassingly little about his business finances beyond what he chose to share. I'll need authorized access to review the business records, Vincent explained. Since you're not listed as an owner, that will require your husband's cooperation. He won't agree if he's hiding something, I said. Vincent's expression was sympathetic but resolute. Then we start with public records and work forward. If there are significant issues, we'll find threads to pull. The process Vincent initiated was both illuminating and devastating. Through public records, banking documents I was authorized to access, and careful review of our tax returns, a troubling picture emerged over the next week. Nathan's contracting business had been struggling for over 2 years, accumulating significant debt. Projects he'd described as profitable had actually lost money. There were unexplained transfers to an LLC I'd never heard of, and personal expenses being run through business accounts. This isn't definitive evidence of fraud, Vincent cautioned during our third meeting. But there are serious financial management issues here, at minimum. I felt sick. What should I do? That depends on your priorities, he said. If you want to protect your inheritance, I'd recommend establishing completely separate accounts immediately if you haven't already. If you want the full picture of what's happening, we need more information, which might require legal steps. I chose both paths. I opened new accounts at a different bank and transferred my inheritance funds there. I also engaged a family. Law attorney Vincent recommended Julia Santos, who specialized in complex financial cases. She advised me to gather more information before confronting Nathan. Knowledge is leverage, she explained. Right now, he doesn't know what you know. For the next 2 weeks, I lived a double life. outwardly considering Nathan's business proposal while privately investigating the reality of our financial situation. I returned to work at the clinic, using my routine as cover for meetings with Vincent and Julia. Nathan seemed relieved by my re-engagement, interpreting my questions about his business as renewed interest in the investment opportunity. The final piece fell into place unexpectedly. While Nathan was showering one evening, his phone lit up with a message notification on our bedside table. I had never been the type to snoop, but something propelled me to look. The message was from someone named Alex. Meeting still on for tomorrow? Revisions to the investor presentation ready. She suspect anything? My hand trembling, I opened the message thread and quickly scrolled through weeks of exchanges discussing the plan, the investment, and repeatedly, her money. There were references to debts I knew nothing about, a property in Vale I'd never heard of, and most damning, explicit strategies for convincing me to invest my inheritance. Playing supportive husband role. Winning strategy, Nathan had texted 3 weeks earlier. She's softening. Guilt over Gran always works. I took quick photos of key messages with my own phone, then replaced his exactly as I'd found it. When he emerged from the shower, I somehow maintained normal conversation, though my heart was pounding so loudly I was certain he must hear it. The next day, while Nathan was at his mysterious meeting, Vincent confirmed what I now suspected. The unknown LLC was registered to Nathan and Alexander Reeves, a former college roommate. They had been purchasing and flipping properties unsuccessfully, for years, accumulating debt with each project. Nathan's contracting business had been used to funnel funds into these ventures, explaining its financial troubles. Based on what we've found, Vincent said gravely, your inheritance isn't intended for a new legitimate business. It's meant to bail out years of failed speculation and mounting debt. Julia was more direct. He's planning to use your grandmother's money to save himself from financial ruin of his own making. And he's been deliberately deceiving you to accomplish it. That evening, I packed essentials while Nathan was out and drove to the cottage. From that safe distance, I sent him a simple text. I know about the debt. I know about Alex. I know about all of it. I've moved out and secured my inheritance. My lawyer will contact you. His response was immediate and explosive. First denial, then anger, then a desperate attempt to reframe the narrative. He called repeatedly until I blocked his number. Later that night, security cameras I'd installed at the cottage captured him driving up the long driveway, sitting in his truck for 20 minutes, then leaving when it became clear I wouldn't come out. The divorce proceedings were both simpler and more complex than I anticipated. Simpler because we had no children and fewer joint assets than I'd realized. More complex because Nathan's financial deception extended further than even Vincent initially discovered. The business was effectively bankrupt with creditors circling. The Cherry Creek office property he'd been eager to secure with my inheritance was actually a massive personal residence he and Alex had planned to purchase together. Through my grandmother's foresight in structuring my inheritance and the swift actions I'd taken to separate funds, my financial future remained secure. Nathan, however, faced not only divorce, but potential legal consequences for various financial improprieties Vincent uncovered. When confronted with the evidence in mediation, Nathan's carefully constructed confidence crumbled. I was going to fix everything, he insisted desperately. The business would have worked with proper funding. We would have paid everything back. There was never a we in your plan, I replied calmly. Only what I could provide for you. 1 year has passed since the divorce was finalized. The cottage has become my permanent home, renovated thoughtfully as a place of healing rather than profit. I've reduced my clinic hours to establish a small practice providing physical therapy to elderly patients with limited mobility, bringing treatment to those who struggle to reach traditional healthcare settings. A portion of my inheritance funds this work, allowing me to serve patients regardless of their insurance status. I've learned that financial literacy isn't just about understanding money. It's about understanding value, just as my grandmother tried to teach me. The value of independence, the value of transparency, the value of trusting instincts that whisper when words and actions don't align. Sometimes I wonder if I could have seen the truth sooner. The signs were there. My grandmother certainly saw them. But I've stopped blaming myself for trusting someone I loved. Instead, I focus on the wisdom I've gained. Relationships should enhance your sense of self, not diminish it. Financial partnership requires mutual transparency, not compartmentalized control. And sometimes the most valuable inheritance isn't money at all, but the insight of those who truly love us. Nathan, I've heard, has moved to another state and started over. I wish him well, but from the safest of distances. As for me, I'm building a life that honors my grandmother's legacy. Not just her financial gifts, but her wisdom, independence, and clarity of purpose. In the end, her greatest gift wasn't the money that revealed my husband's true character. It was the example she set of a woman who knew her own worth and lived accordingly. That's the inheritance I cherish most. The meeting with Ms. Winters, my grandmother's attorney, still played in my mind as I drove home from her office. The leather portfolio containing all the inheritance documents felt heavy on the passenger seat beside me. $2 million. The number seemed impossible, almost fictional. Helen had always lived modestly in her mountain cottage, clipping coupons and buying generic brands. Yet somehow she'd accumulated this fortune through decades of careful investing and foresight. I pulled into our driveway, noticing Nathan's truck already there. Unusual for him to be home this early. Taking a deep breath, I gathered the portfolio and headed inside. The moment I opened the door, I knew something was different. The smell of rosemary chicken filled the house. Nathan had cooked dinner, something he hadn't done in months. A bottle of wine stood open on the counter, already breathing. "There she is," Nathan called from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a dish towel. His smile seemed brighter than usual, his energy practically buzzing. "How did it go?" I set my keys down slowly. It was surprising. Good surprising or bad surprising? He approached, placing his hands on my shoulders, eyes searching mine. "Good, I think," I replied cautiously. Gran left me the cottage, which I expected, but there's more. A lot more. Nathan guided me to the kitchen island where he'd already set 2 wine glasses. "Tell me everything," he urged, pouring generously. As I explained the details of the inheritance, the investments, the liquid assets, the property value, Nathan's eyes widened. He asked precise questions about payout timelines, investment structures, and tax implications. His mind was clearly racing ahead, connecting dots on some mental canvas I couldn't quite see. "This changes everything for us, Becca," he said finally, raising his glass. To Helen, the most incredible grandmother anyone could ask for. We clinked glasses, but something felt off in his enthusiasm. It wasn't that he was excited for me. It was the calculating look behind his eyes, as if he'd just found the missing piece to a puzzle I didn't know we were solving. That night, Nathan was attentive in ways he hadn't been in months. He asked about my memories with Helen, insisted on running me a bath after dinner, even massaged my shoulders as I soaked. But his questions kept circling back to the inheritance. When? Exactly would funds be accessible? Were there any conditions attached? Had I thought about how we might use this opportunity? I fell asleep exhausted from the emotional day, but woke around 2 a.m. to find Nathan's side of the bed empty. Padding. Downstairs in search of him, I found the office door slightly ajar, light spilling into the hallway. I paused before reaching the doorway, hearing Nathan's hushed voice. "It's more than we thought, Alex. Way more." A pause. "No, she doesn't suspect anything. Why would she?" I've been the perfect supportive husband. Another pause, then a low laugh. Don't worry about Becca. She trusts me completely. Once the funds clear, we'll move everything into place. The Cherry Creek property is just the beginning. My blood ran cold. I'd never heard of anyone named Alex connected to Nathan's business. I maintained my composure somehow, asking casual questions about his day while my mind screamed with newly discovered truths. I've been thinking, he said as we finished dinner, we should consider using some of the inheritance to consolidate our finances. Start fresh, Pay off the house, clear any business debts, then use the rest as capital for growth. What business debts exactly? I asked, keeping my tone light while watching his reaction carefully. His expression flickered momentarily. Just the usual overhead costs, equipment loans. Nothing major, but it would be smarter financially to clear them than to carry the interest when we have the cash available. The casual lie stunned me. Nearly $1 million in concealed debt dismissed as nothing major. I took a sip of water, buying time to steady my voice. I think I want to take things slowly, I said finally. Gran's money represents her entire life's work. I don't want to rush into anything. Nathan's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Of course, babe. No pressure. But opportunity doesn't always wait for perfect timing. There's a commercial property in Cherry Creek that would be perfect for the design build firm. If we move quickly, we could secure it before it hits the market. The design build firm that exists only on paper? I asked before I could stop myself. His eyes narrowed slightly. What's that supposed to mean? I backtracked, not ready for a full confrontation. Just that it's still in the planning stages. We haven't even decided if that's the direction we want to go. We've been talking about it for months, Becca. His tone held an edge now. I thought we were on the same page. This inheritance is the break we've been waiting for. The "we" struck me as particularly galling, given what I now knew. I excused myself to clear the dishes, needing physical distance to maintain my composure. As I loaded the dishwasher, a plan began forming in my mind. I needed time and space to figure out my next steps without Nathan's influence or manipulation. The following morning, I called my clinic and requested emergency personal time, citing ongoing grief from my grandmother's passing. Then I packed a small bag while Nathan was in the shower and left a note saying I needed a few days at the cottage to sort through Helen's belongings. Take all the time you need, Nathan texted after finding my note. Let me know if you want company this weekend. Love you. The drive to the mountain cottage took just over an hour. Windswept spring rain matching my turbulent emotions. With each mile, the pressure in my chest eased slightly. By the time I pulled into the gravel driveway, I could breathe again. The cottage stood solid and welcoming against the backdrop of pine trees, looking exactly as it had throughout my childhood. Inside, everything remained as Helen had left it. Books stacked by her favorite chair, a half-finished knitting project in a basket, pantry stocked with her preferred teas. I moved through the room slowly, absorbing the essence of her practical wisdom that seemed embedded in every carefully chosen item. In her home office, I found a business card tucked into her desk calendar. Julia Santos, family law attorney. The date written beside it was just 2 months before Helen's passing. Had my grandmother been preparing for this possibility? Had she seen warning signs in my marriage that I'd been blind to? I called Julia's office and was surprised to secure an appointment for the following morning. A cancellation had opened a slot. Ms. Santos specifically said to fit you in when you called, the receptionist explained. She said she'd been expecting to hear from you. That night, in my grandmother's guest room, I slept deeply for the first time in weeks. The next morning, I drove to Julia's office in the nearest town, a renovated Victorian house with a discreet professional sign. Julia Santos was nothing like I'd imagined. I'd expected someone older, stern perhaps, but she was approximately my age with a warm smile that put me immediately at ease. "Rebecca Taylor," she said, greeting me with a firm handshake. Your grandmother spoke very highly of you. I blinked, in surprise. You knew Helen? We served on the hospital board together for years. She consulted me professionally about 2 months before she passed. Julia indicated for me to sit. She wanted to ensure her estate was structured to protect you, though she didn't share specific concerns. The realization that Helen had taken proactive steps to protect me intensified both my grief and gratitude. She saw something in my marriage that I didn't, I admitted, emotion tightening my throat. Helen was exceptionally perceptive, Julia agreed. Now, tell me what's happening and how I can help. I explained everything: the inheritance, Nathan's hidden business venture, Vincent's findings, and my growing certainty that Nathan had been positioning himself to access my grandmother's money to solve his financial problems. Julia listened, without interruption, taking occasional notes. When I finished, she leaned forward slightly. Rebecca, based on what you've shared, I'm concerned the situation could escalate quickly. Men who conceal financial information often become desperate when their plans are disrupted. What should I do? The question came out smaller than I intended. First, secure your inheritance. Today. Open accounts in your name only at a different bank, one Nathan has no relationship with. Transfer any funds that have already been distributed. Second, document everything: communications, financial records, anything that establishes the pattern of deception. She handed me a folder with information. Third, consider whether you want to attempt to salvage this marriage or proceed directly to separation. There's no right answer, but your strategy differs significantly depending on that decision. I stared at the folder, the weight of the decision pressing on me. I don't know yet. Everything's happened so fast. Then protect yourself while you decide, Julia advised. Protecting your assets doesn't have to be a permanent decision about your marriage. Before leaving her office, I scheduled a follow-up appointment for the following week. Then I drove to a regional branch of a national bank where neither Nathan nor I had accounts and spent 2 hours with a personal banker, opening new accounts and arranging for the direct transfer of my inheritance funds. That evening, Nathan called. How's it going up there? Missing me yet? His tone was light, playful. Just taking some time to process everything, I replied, keeping my own voice neutral. Going through Grand's things brings up a lot of memories. Find anything interesting? The casual question seemed loaded somehow. Just personal items mostly. Photos, books, knitting projects. No investment documents or account information? The question was too specific, too revealing of his focus. I haven't really been looking for those, I said carefully. The attorney has all that information. There was a slight pause, and the way he said my name, dismissive, almost condescending. I quietly backed away from the door and returned to bed, mind racing. When Nathan slipped back under the covers 20 minutes later, I pretended to be asleep, though every muscle in my body had tensed. The next morning over coffee, I casually asked, "Who's Alex?" Nathan's hand paused imperceptibly as he reached for the sugar bowl. Alex? Where did you hear that name? You mentioned a client named Alex last week, didn't you? I lied, watching his reaction carefully. His shoulders relaxed slightly. Oh, right. Alexander Reeves. Potential client for a home renovation in Washington Park. Nothing confirmed yet. I nodded and changed the subject, but the seed of doubt had taken root. Later that day, while Nathan was meeting with a supplier, I did something I'd never done before. I searched through his desk drawers. It felt wrong, invasive, yet the memory of his late-night conversation propelled me forward. Most drawers contained what you'd expect: office supplies, business cards, instruction manuals for various tools. But in the back of the bottom drawer, I found a folder labeled AR Ventures tucked beneath some old warranties. Inside were documents for an LLC jointly owned by Nathan Taylor and Alexander Reeves, established 3 years ago, just after we were married. Bank statements showed regular transfers from our joint account to this LLC, labeled as business expenses in our household budget. I photographed several pages with shaking hands, then carefully returned everything exactly as I'd found it. That afternoon, I called Elaine Davidson, the financial advisor who had reviewed Nathan's business proposal, and asked if she could recommend someone with expertise in forensic accounting. "Is everything all right, Rebecca?" she asked, concern evident in her voice. "Just being thorough," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Grandmother always said to verify before you trust." Elaine was silent for a moment. "I know someone excellent, very discreet. His name is Vincent Mercer." 2 days later, I met Vincent at a coffee shop downtown, far from any of Nathan's usual haunts. He was younger than I expected, with keen eyes that missed nothing and a methodical approach that immediately put me at ease. "So, you found documents?" "For a business partnership your husband never disclosed," he summarized after I explained my concerns, "and overheard a conversation suggesting some kind of plan involving your inheritance." I nodded, feeling slightly ridiculous saying it out loud. "It might be nothing. Maybe it's a surprise business opportunity he's planning to present to me." Vincent's expression remained neutral. "Maybe. But in my experience, legitimate business plans don't require secrecy from spouses or late-night coded conversations." He passed me his card. "I'll need authorized access to financial records to conduct a proper analysis, joint accounts, tax returns for the past 5 years, any business documentation you can legally provide." "What if I can't get everything you need?" I asked. "Then we work with what we have and build from there. Public records can tell us a lot, so can patterns of behavior." He leaned forward slightly. "Mrs. Taylor, people usually come to me when their instincts are already telling them something isn't right. I've learned to respect those instincts." Driving home, I wrestled with conflicting emotions. Part of me felt disloyal for even consulting Vincent. Nathan and I had been together for years. Surely I was overreacting to an innocent business matter. Yet another part recalled my grandmother's journal entry. "Trust, but verify. Love with eyes wide open." Over the next week, I gathered whatever financial documents I could access without raising suspicion. Our tax returns from a file cabinet in the guest room, bank statements from our joint account, photos of checks Nathan had written for business expenses that now seemed questionable. I forwarded everything to Vincent while maintaining normalcy at home. Nathan's behavior shifted subtly during this time. He began suggesting we take a vacation to process your grandmother's passing properly. He brought up renovations to the cottage to honor Helen's memory. Each suggestion involved me signing papers, giving him access, moving forward quickly before I'd had time to properly grieve. 10 days after my initial meeting with Vincent, he called and asked to meet in person. "I have preliminary findings. I think you should see," he said, his tone giving nothing away. We met at his office this time, a modernized space in a historic downtown building. Vincent pulled up digital records on a large monitor, starting with a timeline he'd constructed. 3 years ago, Nathan and Alexander Reeves formed AR Ventures LLC, he began. Since then, they've purchased 4 properties in Denver's emerging neighborhoods. Based on public records and the partial financial information you provided, all 4 properties were bought with minimal down payments and maximum leverage. He clicked through to another screen showing property values and loan amounts. They appear to have been banking on rapid appreciation to flip these properties quickly. But their timing was off. The market in those areas cooled, leaving them holding properties worth less than they paid, with substantial mortgage obligations. My stomach tightened. How substantial? Vincent's expression was sympathetic but direct. Based on my analysis, approximately $780,000 in underwater real estate, plus another $140,000 in high-interest business loans used for renovations. The room seemed to tilt slightly. Almost $1 million in debt? How could he hide that from me? The debt is technically held by the LLC, not personally, Vincent explained. Though given the amount, I suspect there are personal guarantees involved. The monthly cash flow problem would be significant, which might explain the regular transfers from your joint account to AR Ventures. He showed me a chart tracking these transfers, small at first, a few $100s monthly, growing progressively larger over the past year. Money I'd thought was going into Nathan's contracting. Business had been funneling into this secret venture. What does this mean for me? I asked quietly. Legally speaking, your inheritance should be protected as separate property, not marital assets. However, Vincent cautioned, that protection isn't automatic. If funds are commingled in joint accounts are used to pay marital debts, the distinction begins to blur. He handed me a folder with his findings. My recommendation would be to secure your inheritance in accounts that are solely in your name and to consult with a family law attorney about protecting your assets. I left Vincent's office in a daze, the folder clutched to my chest. Everything I thought I knew about my financial life with Nathan had been a carefully constructed illusion. The contracting business that I believed was stable but stuck was actually subsidizing failing real estate speculations. The man I trusted with everything had been systematically hiding massive debt while positioning himself to access my inheritance. That evening, Nathan came home with takeout from my favorite Thai restaurant and plans to discuss the next steps for our future. Right, of course. Listen, I've been doing some preliminary work on the business plan. Really exciting potential. When do you think you'll be home so we can discuss next steps? Probably a few more days, I hedged. There's more here than I expected to sort through. I could come up tomorrow, help you out. 2 people would make it go faster. His persistence triggered warning bells. Thanks, but I think I need to do this alone. It's part of my grieving process. After we hung up, I felt uneasy. Nathan's questions about financial documents, his eagerness to join me at the cottage. It all suggested increasing impatience with my delay in providing access to the inheritance funds. The next morning, I received notification that the inheritance transfer was complete. My grandmother's investments and liquid assets were now secured in accounts solely in my name, protected from Nathan's access. I felt both relief and a strange sense of grief, as if this necessary act of financial self-protection marked the death of something else, the trust that should exist between spouses. I spent the day continuing to organize Helen's belongings, finding comfort in the methodical work. Around 3 p.m, my phone dinged with a text from an unknown number. This is Vincent Mercer. Please call when convenient. New information regarding AR Ventures. I stepped onto the back deck, surrounded by pine trees and spring mountain air, and called the number. Mrs. Taylor, Vincent answered immediately. Thank you for calling. Back. I've uncovered additional information you should be aware of. The Cherry Creek property your husband mentioned isn't zoned for commercial use. It's a residential property. A luxury home, to be specific, currently priced at $4 million. My grip tightened on the phone. What are you saying? Based on document filings I've accessed, AR Ventures submitted a purchase offer on this property last week, contingent on financing. The deposit check came from your joint account. The pieces suddenly locked into place with sickening clarity. Nathan wasn't planning to use my inheritance to establish a legitimate business. He was planning to use it to purchase a luxury home under his separate LLC, effectively transferring my inheritance into an entity I had no legal claim to. Is this legal? I managed to ask. It exists in a gray area, Vincent replied. If you knowingly signed off on using inheritance funds for this purpose, it would be difficult to challenge later. This is why I felt it was urgent to notify you. After thanking Vincent, I sat on the deck steps, watching sunlight filter through the pines while my marriage dissolved in retrospect. Every conversation about the inheritance, every suggestion about our future, every hastily presented document Nathan had tried to get me to sign, all of it had been calculated to separate me from my grandmother's legacy. I was still sitting there an hour later when I heard a vehicle approaching on the gravel driveway. Nathan's truck appeared around the bend, though I'd explicitly told him I needed space. As he parked and stepped out, something in his demeanor had changed. The careful mask of supportive husband had slipped, revealing impatience and calculation in his expression. "Surprise," he called, approaching the deck. "Thought I'd come help after all. You've been up here alone long enough." I stood, keeping the porch railing between us. "I told you I needed more time." He shrugged, climbing the steps. "And I decided you've had enough time. We need to talk about the inheritance and next steps. No pretense now about helping with Helen's belongings or supporting my grief, just the naked truth of his agenda." "I know about AR Ventures," I said quietly. "I know about Alexander Reeves. I know about the almost $1 million in debt you've hidden from me. And I know about the offer on the Cherry Creek house." Nathan froze mid-step, shock flashing across his face before it hardened into something unrecognizable. "You've been snooping through my things? Having me investigated? That's your response to me trying to build something for our future?" "Our future?" I repeated. "Or yours and Alex's? The business venture you hid from me for 3 years? The debt you concealed while presenting yourself as financially stable?" His expression shifted, attempting to reframe. "It was a surprise, Becca. I wanted to have everything in place before presenting the full opportunity to you. Yes, there were setbacks, but with your inheritance, we can turn it all around. We're married. What's yours is mine. What's mine is yours." The practiced ease of his lie was perhaps the most disturbing part. How many times had he rehearsed this explanation? How confidently he delivered it, as if I should be grateful for his deception. "The inheritance has been transferred to accounts in my name only," I said firmly. "I've spoken with both a forensic accountant and a lawyer. I know my rights, and I know what you've been planning." His facade collapsed completely then, face contorting with anger. "You had no right. After everything I've done for you, 3 years of my life invested in this marriage, and you lock me out at the first opportunity? Everything you've done for me?" I repeated incredulously. "You mean lying about your finances? Hiding a failing business venture? Planning to use my inheritance to bail yourself out without my knowledge? You're being dramatic. It's just business strategy." He moved toward me, and I instinctively stepped back. "We can still salvage this. Just transfer enough to cover the Cherry Creek deposit, and we'll discuss the rest." The audacity stunned me. Even now, faced with the exposure of his deception, he was still trying to manipulate me into financing his scheme. "I think you should leave, Nathan. This is ridiculous. I'm your husband. That money is as much mine as yours." "No, it isn't. And I think you know that. Or you wouldn't have gone to such lengths to hide what you were doing." I pulled out my phone. "Leave now, or I'll call the sheriff. Your choice." For a moment, I thought he might refuse. Something dangerous flickered in his eyes, the cornered look of a man whose carefully constructed plan was collapsing. Then, abruptly, he turned and stalked back to his truck, gravel spraying as he reversed and drove away. My hands were shaking as I immediately called Julia. "He came to the cottage," I explained. "It didn't go well. I told him I know everything." "Are you safe?" she asked immediately. "Yes, he's gone, but I don't think this is over." "It isn't," she agreed, "but you've taken the crucial first step. You've protected the inheritance and confronted the deception. Now, we need to document the confrontation while it's fresh in your mind, then discuss next steps." That evening, I wrote a detailed account of Nathan's unexpected visit and our conversation. Then I called the locksmith, who had previously changed the cottage locks and arranged for him to install a security system the following day. As darkness fell over the mountains, I sat in my grandmother's favorite chair, surrounded by the tangible remnants of her practical wisdom. A text from Nathan arrived around midnight. "We need to talk tomorrow. This isn't over." I didn't respond, but forwarded the message to Julia, adding it to the growing documentation of what was quickly becoming the systematic dismantling of my marriage. Unlike the slow-building doubts and gradual revelations of the past weeks, I now had perfect clarity about the path forward. My inheritance hadn't just provided financial security, it had revealed the truth that had been hiding in plain sight all along. Nathan had never been a partner. He had been positioning himself as a beneficiary, and in that painful revelation lay the first step toward genuine freedom. The morning after Nathan's unexpected visit to the cottage, I woke with a strange sense of calm. The fear and shock had given way to a steely resolve. I contacted the security company Julia had recommended, and by noon, technicians were installing cameras and motion sensors around the property. The cottage that had always represented safety to me would remain a sanctuary, despite Nathan's intrusion. My phone had been buzzing consistently since dawn, texts, calls, and voicemails from Nathan, each message shifting in tone from conciliatory to demanding and back again. I didn't respond to any of them, but downloaded them all and forwarded them to Julia as she had instructed. The pattern of manipulation was so obvious now that I could see it clearly. The alternating pressure and affection, the subtle threats folded into expressions of concern, the rewriting of reality to cast himself as the wronged party. "We built a life together," one message read. "You can't just shut me out because of a misunderstanding about business plans." Another, sent an hour later, "You're being irrational and emotional. This is why I didn't involve you in the business earlier. You don't understand how these things work." And finally, most tellingly, "If you refuse to be reasonable about this, I'll have no choice but to protect my interests legally. Don't force." My hand, Becca. Around mid-afternoon, as the security technicians were finishing their work, Vincent called. "Mrs. Taylor, I've been reviewing additional financial records from the sources we discussed," he began, his voice carrying its usual calm professionalism. "There's something concerning I think you should be aware of." I stepped out onto the deck for privacy, the spring mountain air sharp in my lungs. "What is it?" "There have been several attempts to access your inheritance accounts online since yesterday, all unsuccessful but persistent. The bank flagged the activity as suspicious." His tone remained even, but the implication was clear. "I'd recommend contacting the bank immediately to add additional security protocols." A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the mountain breeze. "You think Nathan is trying to access my accounts? How would he even have my information? Most couples share more financial details than they realize," Vincent explained. "Passwords that follow patterns, security questions with answers a spouse would know, shared devices that store login credentials. It's quite common." I thanked Vincent and immediately called my new bank, speaking with their fraud department to implement additional security measures, new passwords, two-factor authentication, and alerts for any attempted access. As I completed the call, a notification from the newly installed security system pinged on my phone, showing Nathan's truck approaching the cottage again. My heart raced as I watched him park and sit there, engine running, clearly visible on the security camera feed. After 5 minutes of apparent deliberation, he stepped out and approached the front door. I remained silent in the living room as he knocked, then rang the doorbell repeatedly. When I didn't answer, he walked around, the perimeter of the cottage peering through windows. His expression darkened when he noticed one of the newly installed cameras. "Becca, I know you're in there," he called out, his voice carrying easily through the mountain air. "Security cameras? Really? What exactly are you afraid of? I'm your husband, for God's sake." I didn't respond, watching his movements on my phone screen. He tried the door handles, finding them locked, then returned to the front porch. "This is ridiculous," he continued, clearly assuming I could hear him. We need to talk like adults. I understand you're upset about learning about AR ventures, but shutting me out isn't the solution. We can work through this together. The performance was flawless. Reasonable tone, conciliatory words, positioning himself as the mature party seeking resolution. Had I not seen the evidence of his deception, had I not caught him in late-night conversations plotting to use my inheritance, had Vincent not uncovered the extent of his hidden debts and schemes, I might have been swayed. That realization, how easily I could have continued to be manipulated, sent a wave of nausea through me. Finally, after nearly 20 minutes of alternating between knocking and monologuing to the security cameras, Nathan returned to his truck and drove away. I immediately called Julia. He came back to the cottage, I explained, my voice steadier than I expected. Tried to get in, noticed the security cameras, gave a performance for them about wanting to talk things through reasonably. "Did you record his visit?" Julia asked. "The security system does automatically." "Good. Save it securely and send me a copy. Did he make any threats or attempt to force entry?" "No direct threats, and he left when he couldn't get in. But Vincent called earlier to tell me there have been attempts to access my bank accounts online." Julia's tone shifted slightly, an edge of urgency entering her voice. "Rebecca, I think it's time we discuss accelerating our timeline. From what you've shared, Nathan's behavior is escalating. He's attempted to access your finances without authorization, shown up uninvited after you've clearly requested space, and is persisting despite clear boundaries. These are concerning patterns." "What should I do?" I asked, trusting her guidance implicitly. "I'd like to file for divorce on your behalf tomorrow morning, along with temporary orders protecting your financial assets during the proceedings. I'd also recommend relocating temporarily, somewhere Nathan wouldn't immediately think to look for you." The word divorce hung in the air, final and irrevocable. Despite everything I'd discovered, despite the clear evidence of Nathan's true character and intentions, hearing it spoken aloud made it real in a way nothing else had. For a brief moment, I mourned the future I'd once imagined. The partnership I thought we had, the life we'd planned together. But that future had never been real. It had been a carefully constructed illusion, designed to position Nathan to access my resources. "Yes," I said finally. "File the papers. But I don't want to leave the cottage. This is my safe place, and now it's secure. He can't get in without me letting him in." "Are you certain? He knows where you are." I looked around at the solid walls that had sheltered generations of my family, at the security system now actively protecting the property, at the mountains beyond the windows that had always represented permanence to me. "I'm certain. I won't be driven from my grandmother's home by his manipulations. I've spent too much of my life accommodating his needs and desires. Not anymore." Julia's tone held a note of respect. "All right. Stay alert, keep the security system active, and don't engage with him directly. I'll file first thing tomorrow and keep you updated. In the meantime, document everything. Every call, text, visit, attempt to contact you. It all builds our case." After hanging up, I made myself a cup of my grandmother's favorite tea and sat in her reading chair, watching the sunlight shift through the pines outside. The weight of the decision settled around me, not oppressive, but clarifying. For the first time in years, I was making choices based solely on my own welfare, my own future, without filtering them through Nathan's expectations or reactions. The divorce filing landed like a thunderclap in my otherwise quiet existence at the cottage. Julia called midday to confirm it had been submitted, along with motions for temporary orders protecting my finances and prohibiting Nathan from accessing or disposing of any of our joint assets during proceedings. She also filed for a temporary restraining order based on his repeated unwanted visits to the cottage and the attempted unauthorized access to my accounts. "He'll be served by tomorrow," she explained. "Be prepared for a reaction. The security system was an excellent investment. Keep it activated consistently, and don't hesitate to call the sheriff if he violates the restraining order once it's granted. I didn't have to wait until the next day for Nathan's reaction. By late afternoon, my phone exploded with notifications, calls, texts, emails, all escalating in tone from confusion to rage. "Is this some kind of joke?" The first text read. Then, "I just got a call from some lawyer claiming you filed for divorce? What the hell, Becca?" And finally, "A restraining order? Seriously? I've never laid a hand on you. Is this how you repay years of building a life together? By making me look like some kind of abuser? This is low, even for you." I forwarded each message to Julia without responding, following her explicit instructions not to engage. Around 7 p.m., the security alerts triggered again. Nathan's truck barreled up the driveway far faster than was safe on the winding gravel path, skidding to a stop in front of the cottage. He got out, visibly agitated, and stormed toward the front door. "Becca!" he shouted, pounding on the door, with enough force to rattle the frame. "I know you're in there. You can't hide behind lawyers and restraining orders that haven't even been granted yet. Come out and face me." I moved away from the windows, heart racing, and called the county sheriff's department. While I waited for them to dispatch someone to the remote cottage, Nathan continued his tirade, his words clearly captured by the security cameras. "This isn't just about you," he yelled. "You're ruining everything we've worked for, the business, our future, everything. All because you suddenly think you're too good for me now that you've got your grandmother's money? Is that it? You think you can just discard me now that you don't need me anymore?" The irony of his accusations, that I was using him, that I was the one with selfish motives, might have been laughable if the situation weren't so frightening. The mask had completely slipped now, revealing the calculation and entitlement that had apparently been there all along. After what felt like an eternity but was probably closer to 20 minutes, a sheriff's department SUV pulled up behind Nathan's truck. 2 officers approached cautiously, one engaging Nathan while the other circled toward the porch. I watched their interaction on the security feed, the volume too low to catch their exact words, but the body language telling its own story. Nathan gesturing wildly toward the cottage, the officer maintaining a calm, authoritative stance, gradually, creating distance between Nathan and the front door. Eventually, Nathan got back in his truck and left, following the sheriff's vehicle down the driveway. The second officer knocked gently on my door, introducing himself as Deputy Martinez when I answered. "Are you all right, ma'am?" he asked, professional, concern evident in his expression. "Yes," I replied, realizing I was trembling slightly. "Thank you for coming so quickly. Your husband has agreed to leave the property for now," Deputy Martinez explained. "We've advised him that a restraining order is pending, and that continuing to come here uninvited could result in legal consequences. Is there anything else you need from us this evening?" I thanked him again, declined his offer to have an officer drive by periodically through the night, and locked the door behind him. As the adrenaline ebbed, exhaustion swept over me. The reality of what my life had become hit in waves, from seemingly happy marriage to pending divorce, from trusting partnership to security systems and sheriff interventions, all in the span of weeks. That night, I dreamed of my grandmother, not as she had been in her final months, frailer and diminished, but as the vibrant, sharp-minded woman who had raised me after my parents' divorce. In the dream, she sat across from me at her kitchen table, those keen eyes seeing straight through to my core. "Remember what I taught you about storms," she said simply. I woke with her words echoing in my mind. One of Helen's favorite sayings had been about mountain weather. Storms reveal what's been built poorly. The structures with solid foundations remain standing when the winds die down. The metaphor seemed painfully appropriate now. The storm of inheritance had revealed the poor construction of my marriage, exposing the cracks and weaknesses that had been there all along, hidden beneath a veneer of normalcy. The foundation had been compromised from the beginning, built on Nathan's calculation rather than genuine partnership. The temporary restraining order was granted the following day, legally prohibiting Nathan from coming within 100 yards of me or the cottage. Julia called with the news, her tone measured but satisfied. The judge was particularly concerned about the attempted financial access and his behavior at the cottage, she explained. We've also been granted an emergency hearing next week regarding the temporary financial orders. This is moving quickly, which works in our favor given the circumstances. For 3 days, a fragile peace descended. Nathan complied with the restraining order, though my phone continued to accumulate messages from unknown numbers, clearly him using different phones to try to circumvent my blocks. Each message oscillated between self-pity and veiled threats about what the divorce would cost me, financially and socially. On the 4th day, Vincent called again, his usual calm slightly disrupted. Mrs. Taylor, I've discovered something concerning in my continued investigation. There's evidence that your husband has been transferring funds from your joint accounts to AR Ventures at an accelerated rate since your confrontation, essentially emptying the accounts before the divorce proceedings. Can freeze them. My stomach dropped. Is that legal? It's a gray area. The funds are in joint accounts, which means legally he has access. However, the timing and volume of transfers, particularly after being served divorce papers, could be viewed by the court as attempting to hide assets, which is not permitted during divorce proceedings. I immediately called Julia to relay this information. Her response was swift and decisive. I'll file an emergency motion today to freeze all joint accounts and marital assets. We'll address the improperly transferred funds during the hearing next week. She paused briefly. Rebecca, have you checked the cottage's physical security recently? If Nathan is liquidating joint assets, it suggests a level of desperation that concerns me. The question sent a chill through me. The security system is active, and I've been keeping doors and windows locked, but I haven't specifically checked for tampering. Do a thorough check today and consider upgrading to monitored security if you haven't already. Someone who's willing to drain accounts before a divorce could potentially be looking for other assets to leverage. After hanging up, I walked the perimeter of the cottage, checking each door and window for signs of tampering. Everything appeared secure, but Julia's warning had unsettled me. I contacted the security company and upgraded to their monitored service, providing them with the details of the restraining order against Nathan. That evening, as dusk settled over the mountains, I received a text from a number I didn't recognize. You might have the cottage locked down, but what about your grandmother's storage unit? Lots of valuable antiques there. Shame if something happened to them before they could be properly inventoried for the divorce. My blood ran cold. Helen had indeed maintained a small storage unit near her doctor's office in town, where she kept furniture and belongings that wouldn't fit in the cottage, but that she couldn't bear to part with. I'd completely forgotten about it in the chaos of recent events. I forwarded the message to Julia and called her immediately afterward. He's threatening my grandmother's possessions in storage, I explained, panic edging into my voice. I completely forgot about the unit. The inheritance included the contents, but I haven't had time to inventory anything. Do you have the key and address? Julia asked, practical as always. Yes, it's here at the cottage. Text me the details. I'll have someone meet you there in 30 minutes. Don't go alone. True to her word, when I arrived at the storage facility, Julia's associate, a former police officer named Keith who now worked in legal security, was waiting. We approached the unit together, and I felt a surge of dread as I saw the padlock hanging open, the hasp bent where it had been forced. Keith held up a hand, gesturing for me to stay back while he carefully pulled the door open. The interior, light flickered on automatically, revealing utter chaos. Furniture had been overturned, boxes emptied onto the floor, framed photos smashed. It wasn't just theft, it was destruction, deliberate and vengeful. I'll document everything, Keith said quietly, pulling out a camera. "Don't touch anything yet. This is a crime scene now." I stood in the doorway, stunned by the malice evident in the destruction. This wasn't about money or assets. It was about hurting me in the most personal way possible, by desecrating my grandmother's treasured possessions. Antique china lay shattered among torn photographs. A hope chest Helen had received from her own grandmother had been pried open, its contents strewn across the concrete floor. Keith methodically photographed every angle of the damage, then called the local police to report the break-in. While we waited for them to arrive, he placed a call to Julia. "Storage unit has been vandalized," he reported. "Extensive damage to personal items appears deliberately destructive rather than theft-motivated. Police have been called." He listened briefly. "Yes, she's safe. I'm with her now." Another pause. "Understood." He turned to me after ending the call. "Julia is filing an amended restraining order tonight, citing this incident. She's also expediting the financial hearing based on this new evidence of destructive behavior." The police arrived 20 minutes later, 2 officers efficiently documenting the scene and taking my statement. When I mentioned the restraining order against Nathan and showed them the threatening text, their demeanor shifted subtly. "This is a clear violation," the senior officer noted, making additional notes. "We'll need to locate your husband for questioning. Do you have any idea where he might be staying since the separation?" I didn't, I realized. Nathan had been so central to my life for years that it seemed impossible I wouldn't know where he was living now, but I genuinely had no idea. Possibly with Alexander Reeves, his business partner? I don't have an address, but that name should be in business filings. After the police left, promising to follow up once they located Nathan for questioning, Keith helped me secure the storage unit with a new, more robust lock. "I'll stay until we can arrange for a cleanup crew tomorrow," he offered. "You should head back to the cottage. It's getting late, and this has been quite a shock." The drive back to the mountains was a blur of tears and anger. The calculated destruction of my grandmother's possessions revealed a vindictiveness in Nathan I hadn't fully comprehended until now. This wasn't just about money. It was about punishment for defying him, for protecting myself, for refusing to fund his schemes. As I pulled into the cottage driveway, something felt immediately wrong. The security system hadn't sent any alerts to my phone, but the front door stood slightly ajar, a sliver of interior light visible in the gathering darkness. I reversed back down the driveway without turning around, heart pounding, and drove until I was out of sight of the cottage. Then, I called 911. "Someone has broken into my home," I explained to the dispatcher. "I have an active restraining order against my husband, and I believe he may be inside the property. I'm currently safe in my vehicle away from the house." The dispatcher took my information and advised me to remain in my car at a safe distance until deputies arrived. I sat in the dark, engine running for heat, watching the winding road that led up to the cottage. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably closer to 15 minutes, 2 sheriff's department vehicles approached with lights but no sirens, slowing as they passed my car. I flashed my headlights to identify myself, and one deputy stopped, to confirm my identity while the other continued toward the cottage. "Stay here," the deputy instructed. "We'll clear the property and let you know when it's safe." I watched their progress on the security camera feed through my phone. A surreal experience, observing from a distance as officers methodically checked the perimeter of my grandmother's home, weapons drawn. The interior cameras showed no movement, but the front door remained ajar, swaying slightly in the mountain breeze. The deputies entered cautiously, sweeping through each room before giving the all-clear signal. The senior deputy returned to my car about 20 minutes later. "The property is secure, ma'am. No one is inside, but there are signs of forced entry through the back door. Would you like to come assess if anything is missing or damaged?" I followed him up the driveway, a sense of violation growing with each step toward the cottage. Inside, The atmosphere had changed subtly, the sense of safety and peace replaced by awareness of intrusion. Unlike the storage unit, however, the cottage didn't show signs of vindictive destruction. Instead, there was a methodical quality to the disturbance. Drawers left partially open, files rifled through, my grandmother's desk thoroughly searched. "It appears they were looking for something specific," the deputy observed, watching me survey the damage. "Any idea what that might be?" I did have an idea. "Financial documents," I said quietly. "My inheritance paperwork, bank information, investment details. They were in a lockbox in my grandmother's office." We moved to the small room Helen had used as a study. The cabinet where I'd kept the lockbox had been pried open, its contents scattered across the desk. The lockbox itself lay on the floor, also forced open. But the crucial documents were missing: the inheritance paperwork, account details, everything related to the financial aspects of Helen's estate. "I kept digital copies," I said, more to reassure myself than inform the deputy. "And the financial? Institutions have the originals. Taking these papers doesn't actually give him access to anything." "It suggests desperation," the deputy commented, echoing Julia's earlier assessment. "Someone taking significant risks for limited gain." After the deputies completed their report and dusted for fingerprints, they offered to patrol the area. Throughout the night. This time, I accepted. The double violation, first the storage unit, then the cottage itself, had shaken my sense of security profoundly. Once alone, I called Julia despite the late hour. She answered immediately. "Rebecca, are you all right?" "The cottage was broken into," I explained, voice remarkably steady given the circumstances. "They took all the inheritance paperwork, but nothing else appears to be missing or damaged. The police have been here." Julia's response was immediate and decisive. "Pack a bag. You're not staying there tonight. I have a secure apartment I keep for clients in situations like this. No one will think to look for you there." "But the restraining order has clearly not deterred him," she interjected. "2 break-ins in one day represents escalation. The restraining order is a legal document, not a physical barrier. Your safety comes first." As much as I hated the idea of being driven from my grandmother's home, Julia's logic was irrefutable. I packed quickly: clothes, toiletries, my laptop, and the journal Helen had kept with her investment notes, which I'd been keeping with me constantly. Julia's secure apartment turned out to be a modern flat above her law office, accessible only through a key-carded elevator and equipped with state-of-the-art security. "I've had too many clients in high-conflict divorces not to have a safe place for them," she explained as she showed me around. "You'll be comfortable here until we can ensure your cottage is secure and your husband is located by the authorities." That night, in the sterile but safe environment of Julia's apartment, I paged through Helen's journal again, seeking comfort in her familiar handwriting. A passage I hadn't noticed before caught my attention. "True wealth isn't measured in accounts or assets, but in the freedom they provide. The greatest gift of financial security is the ability to walk away from situations that diminish your spirit. Money can't buy happiness, but it can buy options, and options are the currency of self-determination." My grandmother's words resonated with profound clarity. I was using my inheritance exactly as she had intended, not as passive wealth to be managed, but as active liberation from a relationship that had become a trap. Nathan's desperate attempts to access the money, his escalating behaviors when thwarted, only confirmed the wisdom of her insight. As I closed the journal and prepared for sleep in this temporary sanctuary, I realized that despite the chaos and fear of recent days, I felt a growing sense of strength. Each challenge Nathan created, each obstacle he placed in my path, only clarified my resolve and validated my decision to protect myself and my inheritance. Tomorrow would bring the emergency hearing about the financial orders, likely news about the police search for Nathan, and countless other complications. But tonight, in the quiet security of this unexpected refuge, I could finally acknowledge the truth that had been emerging since I first overheard Nathan's late-night phone call. I wasn't just protecting my inheritance from him, I was reclaiming myself. Julia's law office buzzed with quiet activity as we prepared for the emergency hearing. The conference room had been transformed into a war room of sorts, financial documents spread across the polished table, Vincent reviewing figures on his laptop, and Julia's paralegal organizing exhibits for the judge. I'd barely slept in the secure apartment upstairs, but adrenaline kept me alert and focused. The police still haven't located Nathan, Julia informed me as she entered with fresh coffee. But they've issued an alert for him based on the break-ins and restraining order violation. His business partner, Alexander Reeves, claims he hasn't seen him in several days. Vincent looked up from his computer. That's interesting timing. According to banking records, there was a substantial wire transfer from AR Ventures to an offshore account yesterday morning, nearly $100,000. Julia and I exchanged concerned glances. Is he planning to flee? I asked, the possibility, both alarming and oddly relieving. Possibly, Vincent replied, but he'd need your inheritance to make a clean escape. The money transferred yesterday was likely the last of the liquid assets from your joint accounts and whatever they could scrape together from the business. Julia nodded thoughtfully. Which explains the desperate attempts to access your inheritance documents. Without those funds, he's running on fumes financially. She checked her watch. The hearing is in 40 minutes. Are you ready? The courtroom felt simultaneously intimidating and anticlimactic. The mahogany furnishings and formal atmosphere at odds with the administrative nature of the proceedings. Judge Harris, a woman in her 60s with shrewd eyes and no-nonsense demeanor, listened as Julia presented our emergency motion to freeze all marital assets and accounts associated with Nathan or AR Ventures. Your Honor, we have evidence of systematic financial deception and attempts to hide assets, Julia explained, methodically presenting Vincent's findings. Furthermore, as these photographs document, the respondent has violated the existing restraining order, engaged in destruction of property at Mrs. Taylor's storage unit, and broken into her residence, all apparent attempts to access financial information related to her inheritance. Nathan's lawyer, a slick man named Howard Pierce who specialized in high-conflict divorces, argued that we couldn't prove Nathan was responsible for the break-ins. Your Honor, there's no evidence my client was involved in these alleged incidents. Mrs. Taylor is making unsubstantiated accusations to prejudice the court against Mr. Taylor during asset division. Judge Harris reviewed the police reports, silently, her expression giving nothing away. Mr. Pierce, is your client present today? Unfortunately not, Your Honor. Mr. Taylor had an unavoidable business commitment. A business commitment more important than an emergency hearing about his finances? The judge's tone was withering. And can you explain the wire transfer of $100,000 to a Cayman Islands account yesterday morning? Pierce hesitated, clearly caught off guard by the specific information. I'm not personally familiar with that transaction, Your Honor. My client manages various business interests that require international— Save it, Judge Harris interrupted. I'm granting the emergency motion to freeze all assets immediately. Additionally, I'm issuing a financial restraining order, prohibiting Mr. Taylor from accessing, transferring, or disposing of any marital property or funds until the divorce proceedings conclude. She glanced at me directly. Mrs. Taylor, your separate property, including your inheritance, remains protected as non-marital assets based on the evidence presented. As we left the courtroom, a weight lifted from my shoulders. One of my biggest fears, that Nathan would somehow gain legal access to my inheritance despite his deception, had been addressed decisively. The judge had seen through the manipulation and posturing, recognizing the pattern of financial misconduct even without Nathan present. This is an unequivocal win, Julia confirmed as we walked to her car. But we still need to locate Nathan. The financial restraining order only works if he's here to comply with it. Back at Julia's office, a message waited from Deputy Martinez. The sheriff's department conducted a search of Alexander Reeves's residence based on the restraining order. Violation, he reported when Julia returned his call on speakerphone. We didn't find Mr. Taylor, but we did discover something concerning. There were printouts of Mrs. Taylor's financial documents, the ones stolen from the cottage, along with what appears to be a plan to access her accounts through identity theft. My stomach dropped. What kind of plan? Notes about your social security number, mother's maiden name, first pet's name, classic security question information. There was also specialized software installed on a laptop we seized that's typically used to bypass two-factor authentication. Julia's expression hardened. This elevates the situation from a domestic dispute to attempted financial fraud. Have you issued a formal arrest warrant? It's being processed now, Deputy Martinez confirmed. We're also coordinating with financial crimes. Given the nature of these findings, they've taken a particular interest in the case. After the call ended, Julia turned to me, her professional demeanor softening slightly. I know this is overwhelming, but you should know that you've done everything right. Many people in your situation would have missed the warning signs or given in to the manipulation. Your grandmother would be proud of how you've protected yourself. The mention of Helen brought unexpected tears to my eyes. I just want this to be over. I want my life back. We're getting there, Julia assured me. The financial restraints are in place, law enforcement is involved, and your inheritance remains secure. Nathan has lost his leverage. Now it's just a matter of seeing this through to the legal conclusion. That evening, I returned to the secure apartment above the law firm, too wary of another cottage break-in to risk returning yet. After a simple dinner delivered from a nearby restaurant, I was reviewing emails when my phone rang with an unknown number. Normally, I would have ignored it, assuming it was Nathan using another phone to circumvent my blocks. But something prompted me to answer. Mrs. Taylor? A woman's voice, unfamiliar but authoritative. This is Detective Collins with Financial Crimes. We need to speak with you immediately regarding an attempt to access your accounts at First National within the last hour. My pulse quickened. What kind of attempt? Someone using your personal identification information tried to initiate a wire transfer from your primary account. The additional security protocols you established prevented the transaction, but we need you to come to the branch immediately to verify your identity and file a formal report. I can be there in 20 minutes, I replied, already reaching for my keys. Excellent. Please ask for me at the customer service desk. Detective Lisa Collins. I hung up and was halfway to the door when a flicker of doubt made me pause. I hadn't told this detective which bank held my inheritance accounts. And why would I need to go to the bank in person after hours for a report that could be filed electronically or over the phone? With trembling fingers, I called Julia. Someone just called claiming to be a detective, saying there was an attempt to access my accounts. They want me to come to the bank right now. Julia's response was immediate and forceful. Don't go anywhere. What was the detective's name? Lisa Collins, Financial Crimes Unit. Stay put. I'm calling the actual Financial Crimes Unit right now to verify. Less than 2 minutes later, Julia called back. There is no Detective Lisa Collins in the Financial Crimes Division. They haven't contacted you about any account access attempts. This is a trap, Rebecca. A cold realization washed over me. They're trying to lure me out of the secure apartment. They must know I'm staying here. I'm sending Keith over immediately, and I've already alerted building security. Don't open the door for anyone except Keith, and he'll use our code phrase. When he arrives... Within 20 minutes, Keith was at the apartment, his usually calm demeanor intensified with professional focus. The building is secure, he confirmed after checking all entry points. I've spoken with security, and they're reviewing camera footage to see if Nathan or anyone associated with him has been surveilling the building. We didn't have to wait long for answers. Keith's phone rang, and he stepped aside to take the call, his expression darkening as he listened. "Understood. We'll remain in place." He turned to me after hanging up. "Security found footage of Nathan parked across the street this afternoon, watching the building. He appears to be working with at least one other person. A woman who approached the front desk earlier claiming to be delivering documents to the law firm. She likely saw you entering or leaving the building." The realization that Nathan had found me, had been watching and planning yet another attempt to access my inheritance, sent a chill through me. But there was something almost desperate about these escalating tactics: the fake detective call, the surveillance, the increasingly risky fraud attempts. "He's running out of options," I said aloud, the insight crystallizing as I spoke. "The court has frozen his assets, the police are looking for him, and his identity theft plan was discovered. He's getting reckless." Keith nodded grimly. "Desperation makes people dangerous. I'll be staying here tonight as a precaution." Despite Keith's reassuring presence in the apartment's small second bedroom, sleep eluded me. Every noise from the street below, every creak in the building's structure seemed magnified. Around 3 a.m., I gave up on rest and sat by the window, watching the deserted street below while scrolling through old photos on my phone. Snapshots of happier times that now seemed like scenes from someone else's life. A text from an unknown number lit up my screen. "I just want to talk. One conversation to sort this out. Then I'll leave you alone forever. Meet me at Helen's cottage tomorrow at noon. Come alone, or I release everything I know about your father's gambling debts that Helen paid off. Your choice." My father's gambling had been a closely guarded family secret, something even Nathan shouldn't have known about. Helen had indeed paid off significant debts before my father's death, preventing our family home from being foreclosed upon. It was a chapter of our lives that had been painful and private. I showed the text to Keith immediately. He photographed it and forwarded it to both Julia and the sheriff's department, adding it to the growing collection of evidence against Nathan. "He's getting desperate enough to resort to blackmail now," Keith observed, "but this is actually helpful for us. It confirms his location. If he's planning to be at the cottage tomorrow, law enforcement can be ready." By morning, a plan had been coordinated between Julia, Keith, and the sheriff's department. Deputies would stake out the cottage well before noon, waiting for Nathan to arrive for our meeting. Meanwhile, I would remain safely at the secure apartment, far from any potential confrontation. "This may be our best opportunity to apprehend him," Deputy Martinez explained during a conference call. "Based on the evidence we've gathered, the restraining order violations, the break-ins, the attempted identity theft, and now blackmail, we have more than enough to make an arrest when he appears at the cottage." The hours crept by with excruciating slowness. Julia arrived mid-morning with breakfast and updates. "The Financial Crimes Unit has tracked the wire transfer from AR Ventures," she reported. "It went to a shell company in the Caymans, then was immediately transferred again to an account in Panama. They're still tracing the money trail, but it's clear Nathan was preparing escape routes." "Do you think he'll actually show up at the cottage?" I asked, doubt creeping in as noon approached. "It seems too straightforward after all his elaborate schemes." "People usually revert to familiar territory when cornered," Julia replied. "The cottage represents access to you, which he still believes is his path to the inheritance. His other options have been systematically eliminated." At 11:45, Deputy Martinez called. "We have units in position around the cottage, unmarked vehicles only. No sign of Taylor yet, but all approaches are covered." At 12:10, another update. "Vehicle approaching, black SUV, not Taylor's registered truck. Proceeding with caution." The next call came 20 minutes later, Martinez's voice tight with controlled adrenaline. "Subject in custody. Nathan Taylor was in the passenger seat of an SUV driven by Alexander Reeves. They arrived with luggage. In the vehicle and one-way tickets to Mexico departing this evening. Taylor attempted to flee when deputies approached, but was quickly apprehended. Relief flooded through me so intensely that my knees buckled, and I sank onto Julia's office couch. "It's over?" I asked, hardly daring to believe it. "The immediate threat is contained," Julia confirmed, her own relief evident. "He'll face multiple charges: violation of restraining order, breaking and entering, attempted financial fraud, blackmail. Given the evidence, I expect he'll remain in custody until trial." 2 days later, I returned to the cottage with Keith and a security specialist who installed additional measures: reinforced doors, motion-activated lighting, and an upgraded alarm system connected directly to the sheriff's department. The space that had once represented peace and safety was slowly reclaiming its significance, though the shadows of intrusion lingered in subtle ways. As I sorted through the mess left by Nathan's break-in, I found Helen's journal beneath a scattered pile of papers apparently overlooked in his frantic search for financial documents. The leather cover was scuffed but intact, her wisdom preserved within its pages. I opened to a random entry dated 3 years earlier, around the time Nathan and I were married. "Watched R today with her new husband. He orbits her like a planet, around a sun, always positioning himself to absorb her light. She doesn't see it yet. How he performatively treasures what she offers while calculating its value. I must protect her future without undermining her present. Love means preparing safety nets while letting her fly." Tears filled my eyes as the full extent of Helen's foresight became clear. She had structured my inheritance specifically to protect me from the very scenario that had unfolded. She had seen Nathan's true nature years before I had recognized it myself, yet respected my choices enough not to interfere directly. Instead, she had created a financial fortress that would stand ready when needed. The criminal proceedings against Nathan unfolded with surprising swiftness. The evidence was overwhelming. Financial records documenting years of deception, security footage of the break-ins, the identity theft materials found at Reeves's residence, the blackmail text, and perhaps most damning, a recorded jail phone. Call where Nathan admitted to Reeves that he'd married her for the long game, after learning about Helen's wealth years earlier. Faced with multiple felony charges, Nathan accepted a plea deal that included restitution, 3 years in prison, and 5 years of probation with financial monitoring. Alexander Reeves, implicated in both the financial fraud and as an accessory to the break-ins, received a similar sentence. The divorce itself became almost a formality in comparison, a legal dissolution of a relationship that had effectively ended the moment I discovered Nathan's true motives. With the criminal conviction establishing his misconduct, the court had little sympathy for his attempts to claim any portion of my inheritance or even significant marital assets. 6 months after that fateful day when I'd overheard Nathan's late-night phone call plotting to access my inheritance, I sat on the cottage deck with Julia, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of amber and gold. The legal battles were largely concluded, the inheritance secured in carefully structured trusts and investments, and the cottage fully reclaimed as my sanctuary. "I've been thinking about what to do next," I said, sipping herbal tea from one of Helen's favorite mugs, one of the few items recovered intact from the vandalized storage unit. "Staying in Denver doesn't feel right anymore. Too many memories. Too many associations." Julia nodded understandingly. "You have options now. That's the gift your grandmother ensured for you." "I'm considering Seattle," I continued. "There's a specialized physical therapy clinic there focusing on elderly patients with limited mobility, similar to what I was developing here. They've offered me a partnership role, combining clinical work with program development." "Sounds perfect for your skills," Julia observed. "And a fresh start geographically." Helen always said mountains keep you grounded, while oceans remind. "You have possibilities," I mused, recalling one of her favorite sayings. Seattle has both. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the mountain air crisp with approaching autumn. You know what I've realized through all this? I said finally. The inheritance itself wasn't Helen's greatest gift to me. It was the clarity it created, the way it revealed the truth about my marriage, about Nathan's character, about my own strength. Julia smiled thoughtfully. Financial pressure is like a stress test for relationships. It doesn't create character flaws. It exposes them. Exactly. If I hadn't inherited anything, I might have spent years, maybe my entire life, with someone who saw me as an investment rather than a partner. The money didn't just give me financial security, it gave me truth. The decision to sell the cottage wasn't easy, but it felt right as part of my fresh start. The mountain property sold quickly to a young family with twin daughters who fell in love with the reading nook Helen had created under the stairs, a perfect hideaway for children with books and imagination. Watching them explore the space during the final walkthrough, I felt Helen's approval almost tangibly. The cottage would be filled with life and new memories. Before leaving Colorado, I established the Helen West Foundation with a portion of my inheritance, a nonprofit dedicated to providing financial literacy education and emergency resources to women leaving financially abusive relationships. The foundation would offer what I had been fortunate enough to have: expert guidance, temporary secure housing, and the practical support needed to establish genuine independence. My new life in Seattle began with appropriate caution: a furnished apartment with excellent security, careful attention to financial privacy, and a selective approach to forming new relationships. The inheritance that had triggered such chaos now provided the foundation for thoughtful rebuilding. The physical therapy partnership proved more fulfilling than I'd anticipated. Developing programs that brought rehabilitation services to elderly patients in their homes connected me to the kind of meaningful work Helen had always encouraged. Find the intersection of your skills and other people's needs, she used to say. That's where purpose lives. 18 months after Nathan's arrest, I received a letter from him via his attorney. Julia insisted on reviewing it first, ensuring it contained nothing manipulative or threatening before forwarding it to me. Rebecca, it began, the familiar handwriting now strange and distant. As part of my rehabilitation program, I'm required to make amends where possible. I recognize that no apology can undo the deception or pain I caused. The person I became was unrecognizable even to myself, driven by greed and entitlement, rather than genuine connection. I don't expect forgiveness or response. I simply acknowledge the harm I caused and take full responsibility for my actions. Nathan, I read the letter twice, searching for the emotional impact I might have expected: anger, vindication, perhaps even lingering affection. Instead, I felt a curious detachment, as if reading about characters in a story that had concluded long ago. The man who had occupied such significant space in my life and thoughts now seemed reduced to a cautionary tale, a chapter closed. I filed the letter away without responding, not out of bitterness, but from the healthy recognition that some bridges remain best uncrossed. My energy belonged to the present and future, not to nursing old wounds or revisiting closed chapters. On what would have been Helen's 92nd birthday, I visited a small Seattle park overlooking Puget Sound, bringing her favorite shortbread cookies and Earl Grey tea in a thermos. The ritual felt right, honoring her memory in a new place while carrying forward her practical wisdom. As I watched ferries crossing the Sound against the backdrop of distant mountains, I opened her journal to the final entry she'd written just weeks before her passing. The true measure of wealth isn't in accounts or assets, but in the freedom to chart your own course with clarity and purpose. I leave Rebecca not just financial resources, but the space to discover her own resilience. Money is just fuel. It's the journey that matters, and the wisdom to navigate by your own true north. I closed the journal gently, smiling through tears. The inheritance that Nathan had coveted so desperately had never been about the money at all. It had been about liberation, from financial insecurity, from manipulation, from a life built on illusion rather than truth. Helen had known exactly what she was doing in structuring her estate as she had. She hadn't just left me money, she had left me the means to discover my own strength. The sun broke through Seattle's characteristic clouds, illuminating the water with dazzling clarity. I raised my teacup in a silent toast to my grandmother, to difficult lessons learned, and to the unexpected gift of starting anew, wiser and more authentically myself than I had ever been during my marriage. Some inheritances can't be calculated in dollars. Some fortunes aren't listed in wills or trust documents. The most valuable legacy Helen left me was the courage to protect my worth, not just financially, but in every dimension of life. That was an inheritance no one could ever take away, no matter how carefully they planned or how elaborately they schemed. It was mine, permanently and irrevocably, and for that, I would be eternally grateful. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.